Lan Wangji always believed he had no particular interest in talismans, but the crimson character yellow talisman in his hand, now depleted of its power and lying limply in his palm, possessed an inexplicable attraction that drew him in. His fingertips slowly traced over the granular surface of the cinnabar. The talisman's script was evidently drawn in one continuous stroke, without any interruptions or breaks. He smoothed out a piece of white paper and carefully tried to replicate it, but failed. Lan Wangji frowned slightly and tried again, only to fail once more. He found it impossible to complete the talisman in one fluid motion. There were always pauses and stumbles, causing the spiritual energy to escape through the gaps, never able to flow continuously. Maybe it wasn't actually done in a single stroke. There was no rule in the world that said talisman scripts had to be completed in one stroke. But Lan Wangji couldn't accept that possibility. The person's brushwork was so effortless and spontaneous, like a leisurely walk in a serene courtyard, done without the slightest effort. It had to be completed in a single stroke. Walking alone with his hands behind his back on the white stone path leading to the elegance room, Lan Wangji pondered deeply. Behind the lattice window wall, the soft laughter of the young ladies melded together. Lan Shichen called out to him, bringing Lan Wangji out of his deep thoughts. He looked up. "Elder brother, Wangji, why didn't you respond when that lady called out to you just now?" Lan Wangji suddenly turned around, slightly startled. He bowed as required, and the lady he had passed by was taken aback, bowed hastily. Lan Wangji nodded formally, then turned and continued walking. Lan Shichen smiled and asked, "Wangji, are you busy with something?" Lan Wangji replied, "Drawing talismans." Lan Shichen slightly furrowed his brow, seemingly puzzled. Seeing that Lan Wangji had no intention of explaining further, he didn't press the matter and changed the topic. "How did the conversation go today? Any lady that caught your interest?" Lan Wangji replied, "It went fine." "No, there wasn't." Lan Shichen raised his eyebrows slightly and asked his younger brother if he could also attend the gathering in the elegance room. Lan Wangji did not object. Inside the elegance room, a woman dressed in the same blue cloud-patterned attire of the Lan clan sat across from Lan Wangji. Within the Lan clan, those with more distant blood relations were permitted to marry. Thus, it was not uncommon for many within the same generation to seek marriage within the clan. The Lan clan of Gusu is renowned not only for generations of handsome men, but also for exceptional ladies. After the conversation ended, Lan Shichen and several attending elders exchanged approving nods. It was clear that they were very pleased with the lady of the same clan. Not only was she exceptionally beautiful and graceful, but she also possessed outstanding talents. Her display of musical skill at the gathering was particularly stunning, leaving everyone in awe. Sitting together with Lan Wangji, they looked like a matched pair of exquisite sculptures, perfect and harmonious, a truly pleasing sight. The words of praise were openly spoken and reached the lady's ears. She lowered her eyes slightly, smiling gently, and her gaze occasionally drifted towards Lan Wangji. Lan Wangji lifted his robes and rose from his seat, heading straight for the main door. Lan Shichen was slightly surprised. He apologized to the slightly embarrassed lady and her parents, then quickly got up and followed him out. Lan Wangji's figure passed through a cluster of magnolia trees, hesitated briefly, and then disappeared. On the dark wooden corridor of the library pavilion, the sound of flowing robes brushing lightly could be heard. Lan Shichen walked around the corner. A young boy was cleaning. When asked quietly, the boy said that just now, the second young master had borrowed all the books in the library about talisman making. Lan Shichen was speechless for a moment, then, as if remembering something amusing, he relaxed with a smile. The full moon hung high in the sky, its light washing everything in silver. Amidst the swaying tree shadows stood a graceful figure in white, tall and elegant. The nightingale's song was cold and clear, but the person appeared even colder and clearer. This night, it was Lan Wangji's turn for night patrol. Originally, during the day, Lan Wangji was burdened with the task of meeting girls. He had to meet with about 10 of them each day, making him busier than taking academy entrance exams or the imperial examinations. His days were as hectic as charging into battle, with every moment as precious as sand in an hourglass. Truly, the list was exceedingly long. After a week, they had only completed less than 1/10 of it. Numerous parents, seeing the long list of waiting names, were worried and anxious. They came to visit daily, complaining, seeking favors, and employing every trick, hoping to make their daughters be invited to meet in advance. Lan Qiren's residence became a hotspot, with the doorstep worn down by the anxious parents' visits. Out of necessity, Lan Wangji became busier. Before the mountain chickens in Yunshan began to crow, Lan Wangji had already gone through several rounds of meetings. He performed these tasks without complaint, tirelessly meeting all of Lan Qiren's demands. However, his expression remained emotionless with everyone he encountered. His naturally cold face seemed even more indifferent, almost numb. Whether the lady opposite him was dazzling or ordinary, lively or quiet, beautiful or gentle, he treated them all the same. There was no hint of liking or disliking on his face. Even the most observant people, accustomed to reading subtle cues, found themselves up against an impenetrable wall with Lan Wangji. Parents leaving the elegance room were even more bewildered, left entirely to their own perceptions. Those who felt confident patted their chests and asserted with confidence that their daughter had been chosen. Those who felt less optimistic shook their heads, sighed, and prepared to leave. To find out what Lan Wangji thought, people usually sought Lan Xichen's opinion, and thus his residence was also frequently visited by anxious parents. However, Lan Xichen would simply shake his head and say that the situation was still unclear. Consequently, people chose to believe that Lan Wangji was just tired and needed a good rest. Considering this, Lan Qiren exempted him from his night patrol duties with a wave of his hand. Yet Lan Wangji himself said it was no problem, causing Lan Qiren quite a headache. Lan Xichen observed his younger brother's slightly worn-out demeanor and thought perhaps he needed some alone time to relax and rejuvenate. Only then did Lan Qiren, shaking his head, agree to it. Lan Wangji looked up, gazing distant from the eaves, feeling a sense of emptiness in his heart. During the day, people came and went. He had always disliked engaging in conversation or any interaction with others. It was as if he were a blind insect flying into a trap. Every glance upward or downward brought him face to face with young ladies waiting eagerly. The endless array of beauty before him only made him feel mentally exhausted. Suddenly, the sound of light footsteps approached. "Who is it?" Lan Wangji gripped the hilt of his sword tightly, but suddenly felt a numbness on his back. As the world spun, a pair of hands lifted his waist and twisted his shoulders, dragging him into a nearby heap of branches and leaves. He could clearly hear the sound of breathing nearby, yet saw no one. A slightly breathless voice whispered in his ear, "I didn't expect your hearing to be so sharp. Oh well, you'll just have to lie here tonight. Off I go." Lan Wangji had never been caught off guard so silently before. A mix of humiliation and defiance flushed his face, red and white, as he demanded, "Who exactly are you?" The person threw him into the bushes and was about to leave but seemed a bit proud upon hearing this question. "I swear I'll never come back to this place again in my life, so I'll tell you my name, letting you have a keepsake, so you won't be confused about who caught you. Listen carefully." Lan Wangji, who had been studying invisibility talismans day and night, found the current situation both strange and familiar. Sudden insight hit him, and he interrupted, "Are you Wei Ying?" The person was taken aback. "How did you know?" A flash of white light appeared before Lan Wangji's eyes. When he looked down, he noticed that a small corner of the yellow talisman on his chest had gone missing at some point. 3 inches before his chest, the partially unsheathed sword blade quivered slightly. The small piece of the yellow talisman floated and brushed past a pair of slender, fair hands. These white-knuckled fingers were exerting force to resist, apparently. A moment before, Wei Wuxian had ambushed and struck the pressure point of the night patrolling boy, dragging him into a small gap in the flowers. Unexpectedly, he had broken free partially. His long sword had partially come out of its sheath, just enough to brush against the invisibility talisman on his chest and slice off a small piece. The talisman's runes broke, causing the shadow to waver and finally expose Wei Wuxian in the open air. Lan Wangji held his breath and concentrated, only to see a handsome face and a pair of black, bright eyes that blinked in surprise. You? You sliced my talisman? Just as Lan Wangji was about to move, two hands clasped his slowly moving hands. As they pressed down hard, the barely unsheathed sword blade was swiftly forced back into its sheath. His chest was struck twice, and Lan Wangji completely collapsed to the ground. Wei Wuxian patted his shoulder gently in a comforting manner, grinning as he said, "Look at how clever you are with all these little tricks. Well then, stay here until tomorrow night." Lan Wangji glared at him angrily, teeth clenched. Wei Wuxian glanced at him twice, then suddenly made a sound of surprise, his eyes lighting up. "Despite that stern face, you actually look quite handsome."